I'm Maria Menounos, and you're tuned in to Afterbuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
Hello, and welcome back to the most dangerous animal of all after show. We are so happy to be back. It's been a while. I'm Latoya Blakely, your host, and I am joined today by my fabulous co-host, Lisa Masi, who is a history buff, especially all things California. Welcome, Lisa.
Yes, thank you for having me. Glad that we're still continuing the show, even with social distancing.
Right? I kind of like doing shows this way.
I do too. I agree.
Right?
Yeah.
And then we have Cody Epperson back, who is a murder mystery / thriller buff. Is that fair?
That's fair. Yeah, I definitely am like, I need to know more.
He needs to know so much more that he was ahead of us in these episodes.
Right.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit, but now we're all on the same page. We have so much to cover today. We're going to talk about our main topics in episode 3. The Zodiac Killer changes course. The most dangerous animal of all book comes out, and then we delve into these online murder mystery groups and how they felt about Gary in this book. But also, we're going to have a news and special segment. But before we delve in, just tell me your overall thoughts. Lisa, what did you think about this episode?
Very interesting. So different than the first 2 episodes. The first 2 episodes, they were really building the case. I was really believing everything he was saying. And this is the first time we're starting to see little cracks in his story. I wasn't expecting it to go this way. I've been trying to avoid all spoilers. So it's interesting to see little holes being poked in Gary and Susan's story. It was good. It was a good episode.
What do you think, Cody?
I'm gonna be honest. I found it a little boring, this third episode. I'm more invested in the Zodiac Killer themselves over Gary's need for identity, which I totally hear for him. Like, good for you, man. Like, you're striving to find you. But as a documentary about this famous cold case, I'm just like not that invested in like his doubts and his whole drama.
That's fair. I think I probably fall somewhere between both of you. I agree with you, Lisa, that up until this episode, I was like believing Gary. And it seemed like he had a pretty credible case and I was along for the ride. But I also kind of agree with Cody, that this became a lot more factual. And once again, it's a lot of information. It's a lot of facts to remember. And once again, I have like pages and pages of notes
right?
for like what happened during these episodes. But that takes us into our first topic. So episode 3 opens up with John Hennessy, who works for the San Francisco PD, and he's had contact with Gary. And I think Gary asked him to go check on this file, right? Like there was some mention of, wait, let me make sure I get the name right. Roteo
Guilford.
Yes, who was
Roteo,
also an inspector with San Francisco PD and the ex-husband of Jude, who is Gary's mom. So the episode opens there. And then we quickly kind of advance through the episode and start finding out that the Zodiac Killer has started changing course. He's threatened to kill a school bus of kids. There's some mention of like planning a bomb. And then they suggest that he took credit for a murder that he didn't actually commit. So Cody, what did you think about this new information?
I thought it was I found it suspicious because it was just such a different MO, like from going like to shooting or stabbing like teenagers in cars and like kind of sneaking up on them to like outwardly saying, I'm gonna blow up or I'm gonna shoot off these kids on a bus, or it just it didn't add up to me. So I wasn't really, I guess I don't want to say confused. It didn't make sense to me that it was just so different that I almost didn't believe that it was actually the Zodiac Killer saying these things.
I think that confusing is a good word. I think that episode 3 started so like heavy that I almost felt like I needed to go back to episode 2 to see where we were.
Agreed.
What do you think, Lisa?
Yeah, totally agreed. That did kind of seem to come out of nowhere. I think it did, him all of a sudden making these threats for school kids. And then to skip ahead just a little bit, so he has everyone living in fear, which I can't even imagine what it was like to live during that time. Literally thinking your kids could be targeted on a school bus, having this guy make these threats like this. But to skip ahead a little bit, so then after putting out these threats, then he goes and mocks police officers, saying like, "You're idiots, thinking that I'm gonna shoot up kids on a school bus, that this bomb has already been placed somewhere. Just kidding. It's gonna go off in a year. You better find out about this bomb I have placed." So this guy's all over the place.
All over the place. But the school bus was significant to Gary because of the ice cream romance.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Led to believe up until this point that Earl meets Jude or sees her getting off of a school bus. And so to Gary, like, this is an important connection. He met my mom getting off of a school bus. He's saying he's going to target these kids on a school bus. So Gary makes a conclusion that Earl is kind of fascinated on kids in school buses.
Right.
Which is interesting.
Yeah.
And what did y'all think about the part where they said that he started taking credit for murders that he wasn't committing?
Just he's an egomaniac, I don't know. He wants to be in the limelight, and I don't know. I just think it's all about ego.
Yeah, it's definitely his ego. Because it seemed right, like the case kind of like disappeared for a minute, and then I just like it was like he just wanted to have that, I guess, thrill again, which it's just all so strange and murky.
Yeah, and then going back to ego too, again skipping around a little bit, but then he ends up asking the citizens of San Francisco to wear Zodiac buttons. He told the San Francisco Chronicle to promote that, like have all the citizens wear my buttons. I mean, this guy is an egomaniac, so he wanted his name out there as much as possible.
And we talked about this in one of the previous after shows, but the fact that the news outlets advertise this, like there seems to be no level of like censoring and choosing the message that they were sending out to the public. Like it seems as though they were literally reading these letters verbatim and basically told San Francisco citizens that he's going to shoot your children as they get off the school bus. And that just seems absurd to me. I mean, yes, warn people, right? But like maybe warn them in a more intentional, safe way.
Yeah, I agree with that. Not just like, hey, everybody, he's going to shoot a school bus. We don't know which one. So good luck. Like, no, that's going to send people into a frenzy.
Right. Yeah. Someone on there, I don't remember whose quote this was, but someone said that the Zodiac was holding the populace hostage. And essentially that's what he was doing. Yeah, everyone was living in fear, not knowing what was coming next. And all the while also, hey, everyone, wear my buttons, support me. I mean, just crazy.
Yeah.
And then it's crazy. And then the news outlets are catering to that. It's like, okay, that's what you said. We're just going to make sure everyone else knows too. It's like, or you could just not, I don't know, I guess keep it a secret or freak everybody out. Like, what's the...
Right. I guess it's easier for us on the outside to
sure.
Who aren't living there with children.
Yeah.
Right. Something else that I thought was interesting this episode was the idea that whoever the Zodiac Killer was suffered from multiple personality disorder. There seemed to be some progression in the letters that suggested that this person suffered from multiple personalities. So what did you think about that?
I found that really interesting. And again, one of the specialists said, and I found this fascinating, that people tend to age out of this problem. If they have multiple personality disorders, and in the case of the Zodiac Killer, he figured he was like aging out of this character that he had created for himself. I don't know. It was just interesting. It's very interesting. I would be interested in learning more about these cases, because fascinating how his personality was changing like that throughout the years.
And being that you're from California, growing up, was there ever any mention of the Zodiac Killer? Like, did you ever hear about this?
Well, my parents are from, my dad is from here and my mom moved here when she was young. So yeah, they told me about how they experienced, they live in Los Angeles. So this was happening more in Northern California, but they absolutely knew when it was going on. It was a scary time for people. Yeah.
Yeah. Cody, did you have any thoughts about the progression of the letters and multiple personality disorder?
I mean, it's a total trip, but it kind of goes. I guess maybe I'm getting a little skeptical about everything because it kind of just like I don't understand. What I'm not getting is like how can well, I guess if they did the whole like checking like the penmanship and everything test, but it just seems like how can they diagnose someone they don't even know who they are with multiple personalities? So it just seems a little like really stretching it. And I mean it makes sense. He obviously, or the Zodiac Killer obviously has a lot going on, but it doesn't. I just want more answers. It doesn't add up. It's not clear to me how we go from that, how we make this jump.
Yeah, and I think that I agree with you, especially by the end of episode 4. I was like, okay, like what's really happening?
Yeah.
But as far as the multiple personality disorders, they said that like in later letters, there seemed to be a cry for help. Like you gotta stop me. And I guess that's where the multiple personalities came out. So around this time, as far as episode 3, we now move into the book has been published. So The Most Dangerous Animal of All comes out. Gary is on a speaking tour. He's on news outlets. He's, at these events speaking. And his mom receives a phone call from People magazine asking for an interview. And she knew nothing about the book. I mean, slap in the face, in my opinion.
Yeah. And even more so because they had just met for lunch before that. I mean, she knew nothing of this all along. And then they had just met for lunch shortly before that, had a 2.5-hour talk. He mentions nothing to her. I mean, talk about being blindsided talk about using his mom. I mean, essentially he used her. I can't even imagine what that would feel like to be blindsided that way.
Right. And then it seems like he got mad at her for being mad at him.
Right. Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, I couldn't imagine that either. And it's like exactly like you said, like they just had met up like recently before that even the book even came out. And I don't think that's, and then even she was saying, right, that there were discrepancies. She read it and she's like, this isn't accurate. Like you can't say these things. And it's just all, I think Gary there's so much more to him than just like, I want to figure out my identity. I think he has a lot of other, or maybe not a lot, but just like there's some other issue with him that is causing this to be a little more weird than it already is.
And I think, Cody, you brought up a really good point. I mean, I think it's that issue that's kind of led us down this path. Anyway, it's, Gary knowing that he's adopted, wanting to find out who his birth parents are, being left or abandoned in his apartment building. Like he seems to have really suffered all of his life, even probably currently, with the fact that he was abandoned. And he felt as though his parents didn't want him, which then turned into, well, what does that mean for me? And so I agree, like this whole Zodiac Killer search seems like a way to identify and to create an identity for himself.
Absolutely. But the fact that he betrayed his mother's trust in the meantime, it's like, at what cost do you need to find this identity? You're hurting these other people around you, your mother and Susan Mustafa. And his mother even made the comment after this came out, she was offended that Roteo, that it looked like they were trying to cover up Roteo and the San Francisco Police Department. Like she was offended by that. That was her husband, who's not alive to defend himself anymore. And the fact that Gary put all these accusations out there, I mean, he just keeps on hurting other people with kind of his selfishness, I think.
Yeah, and obsession.
Yeah,
the obsession is definitely there, and I think they maybe mentioned this in the first two episodes, is that it's like people, they're obsessed, and it's like Gary especially, he's like too close to it. Like he's so personally enveloped in the case and the Zodiac Killer and finding his own identity. It's like it's so knotted together now that he doesn't see things. He sees things that aren't there, or isn't seeing things that are there, and it's messing up his judgment for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So the book comes out, and I didn't know this. I guess I'm naive. I didn't realize that, or maybe I did realize it, that there are online communities committed,
right? I know,
dedicated to figuring out these mysteries. And so specifically, there's the Zodiac Killer website, zodiackiller.com, and other forums where they were described as amateur sleuths, get to kind of suggest, and I'm not even sure the word I'm looking for, their theories, prove their theories about who the Zodiac Killer was. And so they did not take kindly to this book.
No, they trashed both of them, both Gary and Susan. It's interesting though that they trashed him, and then he went on the message boards and was like arguing back with them. And again, it became this ego thing. You know, you can definitely see that he is like his father in some ways, where, you know, even though his father may not be the Zodiac Killer, his father certainly had an ego, and Gary has that ego as well. And the fact that he's going on these boards and everyone's telling him, don't argue back with the people, you know, just let it roll off your back. And he's getting in these confrontations. I think that was a big mistake.
Oh yeah, the fact that he was like, because people, the internet's gonna talk. People are gonna talk. Well, the haters are gonna hate, and it's just like the fact that he like went on to this forum and created his own account to start talking back to you. That's not it's not that it's not okay. It's just like, in my opinion, like you don't interact with people in that manner. Like the internet is not a place to have an argument, because everyone's a loser in that case. As far as I feel, like no one, not that everyone's a loser. I mean, no one wins. Like it's
right, exactly.
It's just people saying what they want to say, and so that's not. I mean, I'm not even sure what I'm trying to say. Just the fact that he went on to do that, I was like, dude, come on. Like,
it was adding fuel to the fire.
Live your own life.
Yeah.
Yes, it was adding fuel to the fire.
And I just have to say, I feel so bad for his wife. I'm just like, what is
true, yeah.
Like with this man? I mean, he is just obsessed, and he does seem to be ego driven. Like, I hate to say that. But he is obsessed. Like, that's really the best way to put it. And he seems like he's willing to sacrifice relationships and friendships and family members and wives, all for the sake of like accomplishing this goal. And so this book has come out. He's, like Cody said, made the unwise decision to join these chats, and he's being kind of nasty. Like, they're being nasty to each other. But it seems kind of that joining the chat put fuel to the fire with like discrediting his book. So I think a lot of people like the book, but then a lot of people poked holes in the book or in the book, and then accused him of writing things that weren't true.
Yeah.
And then even speaking to his ego again, he made the comment, oh, the forums had never heard of Earl Van Best Jr. Until he brought him up. So he was humiliating them. That's why they didn't like him. That's why the forums didn't like him, because he was humiliating them because they hadn't thought of this theory before. Like, give me a break.
Yeah,
he needs to get over himself. It's just like, dude, why?
I wrote down the line that he said, fingerprints, handwriting, and his full name were in the ciphers. And to him, that was like enough evidence to prove that his dad was the Zodiac Killer. Fingerprints, handwriting, and his full name.
Yeah.
That's kind of a lot, right? Like, we've convicted this guy based on those three things, and no one else could do it.
Well, it's just, it is so, all those things are just so convenient. So like, they really are. It's like, whoa, that's a crazy coincidence. But then I think I forgot their technical title, but they were like, oh, well, in the, what's that thing called? The
cipher?
The cipher, thank you. They're like, yeah, but there's all these rows, and there's so many characters per row. Like, they found thousands of people's names within the cipher. Like, it's not just because you happen to, that name fit one of the many thousands of possibilities, you know, it discredits that's something that they said discredit him, right?
So by the end of
Am I jumping ahead?
No. That's
okay. I was like, I jumped too far.
No. So Lisa said at the beginning of this show that up until this point, she believed Gary and was like, you know, he's made a compelling case. And I agreed with you, Lisa. But by the end of this episode, holes are starting to be poked in Gary's research and evidence and his conclusion. And so by the end of episode 3, we're finding out that the fingerprint analysis wasn't any good.
Mm-hmm.
But right after we learn about that, then there's the introduction of this genetic marker. And Gary claims that the marker of the Zodiac Killer is the same as the genetic marker that he was able to deduce from his father's DNA. What were your thoughts about that?
Well, actually, to your point, what you were saying and what Cody was talking about. So first, they poke holes in his story with the cipher, like Cody was saying. Like they were saying, that you can come up with thousands of names out of the cipher. So he interpreted certain signals certain ways. So that's what Cody was saying. And then you're right, the fingerprint expert poked holes in that, saying it wasn't even the same finger. That anyone can have scars on their fingers. It wasn't sufficient resolution. The photo wasn't. So we've got holes poked in both those theories. And so then the ABC documentary comes out, and they were talking about having DNA, the Zodiac Killer's DNA on an envelope. And that, they showed these different genetic profiles on the special. And Gary was trying to decipher to see what the markers were and compare them to his own marker. So I have to say, so they've been poking holes in the cipher and in the, what was the last thing we just said? The cipher and the fingerprints. So then when he saw this documentary on ABC, then I was like, oh, well, this is compelling, because they tested the Zodiac Killer's DNA and he sent in his, and it appeared to be a match. So now I'm kind of thrown for a loop again. I don't know. What do you guys think?
This was a part that got me a little mixed up, just because I thought that the ABC did their thing and they had their numbers blurred out, and to my understanding, that those numbers weren't even the actual numbers. They were just there to look like, oh, look, we found these numbers, but they're blurred out so you can't see them anyway. Maybe I'm saying that incorrectly, but then what I also under the impression is that it doesn't matter whether if those numbers are correct or not, because the DNA from the envelope and Gary's does have at least enough matching that it's a thing, correct?
Yeah. They had said that they could be 99.8% certain that his father was a Zodiac Killer based on the numbers that he provided them from the ABC documentary, I put in quotes, and with his DNA. So what we've known so far is just he provided the numbers from the ABC documentary and they compared it to his DNA. And there's 99.8% certainty that his father was the Zodiac Killer based on what we know so far.
Lisa, I think that was a great summary of what happened and a good segue into our news segment. So what do you have for us today?
So it's kind of hard to do news, with something like this where we're breaking down each episode. I don't want to skip too far ahead. I don't want to spoil the show for myself. I don't want to spoil it for you all. So when I'm doing research on news, I have to be careful what I'm looking at. So I did find this really interesting article on Vulture online that they did with Susan Mustafa after everything aired. I'm just going to read you parts of it right now. They were talking about how she came to know Gary in the first place. So Gary was advertising in a magazine that she had previously worked for. She was friends with the publisher, and Gary happened to be in the publisher's office telling him he was looking for a writer for his story. At that time, Susan just happened to call the publisher when Gary was in the office. The publisher handed Gary the phone and said, "Man, have I got a writer for you." So Gary began to tell Susan his story, sent her the manuscript, his 500-page manuscript, and she was taken by it. She said at first, a lot of it didn't sound plausible, but the totality of his story with the ice cream romance, the story of his parents, how he was abandoned in the town that she lived in as well, the reunion with his mother and the search for his father, that was something she wanted to investigate further because there were so many stories intertwined into one. The journalist asked her what were some of the things that she felt were implausible about his story. And she said, Gary has a tendency towards grandiosity. He seemed very exaggerated in a way, but as she went through it and started talking about the story with him more, he started presenting evidence for everything he had to tell her. So even if she wasn't necessarily, if she was on the fence about what he was saying, he had evidence to back up everything he was saying. She said they worked together for 2 years. He was a likable person, but he did have a lot of pain. And she said his pain was actually what drew her in and also made her want to help him. She could feel his pain, and he was so convincing. So that's part of the reason why she wanted to help him. And then, so that's just to let you know so far, kind of the backstory, why she got involved with this to begin with, how she met him. And even in the beginning, there were some things she wasn't sure about. She knew he had a tendency to exaggerate, but he was able to back up everything he was telling her throughout their time working together. So that's my news so far to this point.
So I have one question. If this was done after, does she feel like the book was accurate?
What do I say without telling anything away?
Should we save it?
Yeah, I'll save it for next episode. Yeah, I've got a lot more. She had a lot more to say.
All right, sounds
once we know how this all ends. Yeah.
Well, Cody, can you take us to our special segment?
Yes, I have another very interesting offspring or child of a famous murderer. The murderer's name is Gary Ridgway. He was notorious for murdering 49 women in the state of Washington before his capture in 2001. He earned the nickname Green River Killer because he dumped most of the victims' bodies near the banks of the Green River. Ridgway also solicited prostitutes who comprised many of his victims, and received multiple life sentences in prison after being convicted. His son Matthew said in a 2003 interview that his father had been just a regular dad. Although he wasn't a constant presence in his son's life because of a divorce, he would show up at soccer games and taught Matthew how to ride a bike. He never knew of his father's murder spree, although his dad would sometimes show victims his son's picture or his bedroom to keep them at ease, which sounds really, really creepy.
Oh my gosh.
Matthew was 26 years old and a Marine stationed at Camp Pendleton when his father was arrested. At the time of the interview, he lives in California with his wife. But that's what's trippy about so this is what the third murder children we've talked about. It's for at least two of them. I can't remember the one with the witches or something. That one was trippy, but the one they don't know their parents are living this double life of murder, and they're just unlike Matthew's father going to soccer games and whatever, but oh no, he's just killing prostitutes on the side. But yeah, my dad brought orange slices today. That's what really baffles me, is that people really do lead these double lives and we have no idea.
How do you hide that? How do you hide something like that? Right? Oh my gosh.
How did he get caught? Did it say?
I was looking at it in another page. He as part of a bargain plea, he pleaded guilty, I guess, but I don't know how he was actually caught.
I'm gonna have to look into that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And it seems if he dumped that many bodies in the same place,
yeah, right,
someone would have seen them.
I know. You'd think, right?
Right? That's interesting.
Huh.
Well, if Cody doesn't have anything else, I think that wraps up.
No, I thought I could maybe find it really quick, but it just says plead guilty of 48 charges for serial murder.
Jeez.
That's insane.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, I'd have to actually take time away from what we're doing to do further research. But next time I'll have that answer.
Nice.
Yeah, that was a lot of information to cover in episode 3. I'm so glad to see you all again. It is time for us to wrap this episode out. Where can our guests find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Lisa M. Masi. Lisa 2 M's ASI.
I'm also on Instagram as Cody Epp, CODYYEPP. And I'm also on Twitter, but I'm not really there, but it's Cody Epp.
Are you two hosting any other after shows?
Oh, yes. Thanks for reminding me. I'm on the American Idol panel on Sunday evenings. You can find me here.
I'm also on 2 other panels right now. I'm doing Making the Cut, Tim Gunn and Heidi Klum's new show. You can catch us reporting on Friday afternoons at 5. We just saw the first episode. I was like, oh wait, what time is it at? And then I'm also doing The Plot Against America, HBO's miniseries, and we do that Tuesdays at 3 p.m.
That sounds exciting. I'm Latoya Blakely. You can find me on Instagram at Latoya_Blakely. I am on Twitter at Blakely Latoya. Like Cody, I don't get on Twitter very often. And yeah, until next time, buzz you later.
Thanks for watching.
Bye.
Our founder, Kevin Undergaro, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.